But yes, thank you again for joining. And The Brutalist is just a gorgeous film.
Thank you.
I'm really excited and honored to get to talk to you about it and learn about the process, your experience. And I read a quote from you that I wanted to kind of start the conversation with. And you said, the reason I got into it, became a cinematographer and got into film, was not to go and see a tentpole movie. I was inspired by movies that were examinations of humans, not spectacle. So can you tell me a little bit more about that and how you think about
Yeah.
film? And
Yeah, of course. I mean, maybe I was being a little. I didn't mean to be too dismissive. I mean, I'm a big fan of a lot of different genres, but I suppose, you know, I suppose that you could argue that increasingly. I mean, it's just economics. In many regards, that there's a lot of movies are maybe a number of movies are a little kind of like shorter on examination of the human condition and more sort of theatrical kind of spectacle experience, which is fine, but it's not the films that, I mean, I haven't shot movies like that. It's not what I gravitate towards, it's just my own personal preference. Although saying that, there are spectacle movies that do have incredible incredible characterization, incredible scripts. June, for example, both movies are incredible, and they are very much kind of big, huge audiences and huge appeal. But I think that's it's striking that balance. I think, I'm not the first to say it. It's just like, I got into it because I want to get my teeth into something that kind of gets under the hood a little bit of like what it is to be a human, and it's these two things aren't mutually exclusive, but I guess historically that's always, I guess the less money that is spent, maybe the bolder those examinations can often be.
well, and speaking of The Brutalist, you guys had what would probably, for the scale that you guys were able to capture in the movie, it was a relatively smaller budget. And how did you tackle going into it with such a big vision and then kind of navigating the constraints of budget and time? Because also you had a really short shooting window.
Yeah, it was like 33 days of filming for somewhere around $9 or $10 million budget. It was very, very ambitious, It was very ambitious, but it was the third film with Brady that I've shot for Brady. And so we had a certain shorthand, and, we don't contradict each other too much on set. There's a healthy collaboration and healthy discussion. But, a lot of the time a lot of the time Brady will say like, hey, I want this whole scene to play in one shot, for example, And so therefore there's not, he's very adamant about that. I mean, he's not dogmatic, but he's like, this is really what I want. What do you think? How do we do it? And so my response is to try and facilitate that, rather than tell him he needs more coverage, So that helps a lot in order to try and achieve it in that way. I've said it before, but, if you keep adding shots, then you add numbers of takes to the shots, and like the branches of a tree, it sort of exponentially grows, and suddenly your day is gone. So I think, so what you see in The Brutalist is pretty much what we shot. And lighting wise, I do light, but I tend to be quite. I think both Brady and I cut our cloth on the day. Like, one of the first things I'll say to the first AD is, what time do we want to be off this scene? Because I don't want to not make our days any more than anyone else. I mean, and therefore you have to make certain compromises or concessions. It's just a responsible way to behave.
Yeah. How has your collaboration with Brady evolved over the different films that you've shot together?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting one. I think, unofficially, very unofficially, these movies are a sort of an unofficial trilogy, if you like. I mean, I think they share a commonality. All three of them are period films: Childhood of a Leader, Vox Lux, and The Brutalist. They all examine themes of maybe modernity versus antiquity. They're all three of them are kind of fictional examinations of a sort of fictional central character. You know, a young fascist, a pop star, and a brutalist post-war architect, immigrant. You know, an immigrant to America. So you know, with that in mind, I think our relationship has evolved, of course, and each film is a different. You know, we don't want to be retreading the same thing or every movie to look the same, but there is a commonality as well. There's a kind of common language, and you know, the beginning of Vox Lux is echoed in the beginning of this film in some regards. You know, this kind of these shots down a road over the opening credit sequence and things like that that sort of propel you into the film. But yeah, you know, it feels like a very natural progression. As I said, I feel like from the very first film we did together, we have similar tastes and, you know, aesthetic choices. And so, it was a joy. And obviously we were stretching different, exercising different muscles, and there were some things we had. Obviously the VistaVision was something we hadn't done before. So yeah, it was a great experience in that regard.
And I heard Brady say about you that you're a very hard worker, but you have the heart and spirit of a poet.
Oh, well, that's very nice to hear. I mean, he's become a dear friend, and we enjoy each other's company very much. I mean, I think it's interesting. Like I recently was in Rotterdam for the Robbie Mueller Award, and I was looking. There's a wonderful documentary about Robbie Mueller's work, and in the documentary, Jim Jarmusch talks about Robbie having, you know, each foot in a different canoe, and cinematography is like that. You know, it's like you do have to know the technical, you do have to work hard, you do have to you know, manage a lot of different things, a lot of different people and departments, you know, grip, lighting, camera, right? But at the same time, you have to have something to say. You have to have a voice, a poetic voice, or you know, and be very aware of the story and how you're telling that through the language of cinema, you know? It's like, you know, I try to hope, you know, I think the best version of cinematography is to elevate it out of the technical, you know. It's that's how I regard it.
That's great. And so yeah, just a reminder that if you have a question, please drop it in the chat. I'm looking at it, and there's two questions right now about the Statue of Liberty shot. Why was the shot taken that way? And can we talk a little bit more about that shot?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to talk about it is throughout the films, there's a certain kind of a reality, a certain naturalism to our aesthetic in the films. And there are other points where either through lighting or through the movement of the camera, the film transcends reality. It becomes an impression of something else, you know. So, you know, we've kind of recently referred to it as kind of the untethered camera, you know, points where the audience thinks the camera is doing one thing and then it suddenly evolves. In the case of Childhood of a Leader, it sort of spins wildly through the crowd. In the case of The Brutalist, Laszlo Toth, played by Adrien Brody, arrives into the New York harbor, witnesses the Statue of Liberty, but we then get an impression of the Statue of Liberty that is sort of tumbling through the frame. Now, it's not literal at that point. It's transcended something, and it's become an impression for Laszlo and the audience of what America may represent. You know, I mean, there are three movies now. Maybe more. Brutalist, ending of Planet of the Apes and Ghostbusters. 3 points where the Statue of Liberty behaves very differently to what we expect. And it's very unsettling. I mean, I didn't grow up in America, and yet the Statue of Liberty to me, it's an icon. I mean, it's like, it's what it represents, and the very fact of where it stands in the New York Harbor for people coming to seek a new life into America, and it stands proud and it stands firm, and it's liberty, and it should not behave in the way that it does in the movie, and it's obviously a portent. Or a sense that things are not necessarily all. They're not as they're not as maybe the offer of this offer of a new hope is not as reliable, shall we say, as as the American dream claims it to be.
So there's a lot of poetry and meaning behind a lot of the choices that you guys made. And I was curious, and there's also a question a little bit about the research process. What was that like? I also heard that when you guys wrapped the last features, when he handed you a book about brutalist architecture and was like, hey, this is the next thing we're doing. So What does that look like for you? And then getting into the weeds of production design, building the worlds. What was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a long process because of COVID and, and just the mechanics of getting a movie of this budget off the ground, It took about 7 years, I think, Brady's, suggested from, to get the camera rolling. So during that time, obviously, there's a lot of dialogue and there's a lot of exchange of ideas and imagery and things like that. I think early on, our discussions were less focused on the architecture. I'm sure Judy's and Brady's architectural discussions were much more in-depth. I think what we were interested in is, okay, moving image, by definition, a moving art form. Architecture is kind of by definition most of the time a fairly static, inert, inanimate kind of art form. How does one represent that in cinema? How does one convey to the audience what it feels like to move through that space? So we were really talking about the height of the camera, the field of view, the angle, the focal length of the lens that we would use. Whether or not that's close to the human eye or not, depending what we want to express, the speed that the camera is moving through the spaces, things like that, And
is that, at what point did you guys decide to go with VistaVision?
I think quite early on, Brady suggested it. We'd already, we've always shot film, and then we've always kind of had an ambition to explore larger formats as well. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do it on other films, but this with VistaVision, for those that don't know, VistaVision is still 35mm format, but instead of pulling the film down through the gate vertically, 2, 3, 4 perforations at a time, it pulls it across horizontally, 8 perforations at a time. So the best way to think of it is like shooting a stills camera. It's like the original full frame 35mm, right? Brady wanted to explore this idea, less for the resolution, to be honest, because there obviously is increased resolution because the neg area is twice as large, but more for the fact that he wanted to use a camera system that, a lot of the movie takes place in the 1950s, right? And the birth of the VistaVision system was around that time, used by Hitchcock in various movies. So he felt that it was a nice idea to use a camera system of that time. And also what that does is the bigger neg area allows a wider field of view. So if you wanted to get a wider field of view, traditionally, you'd have to shoot on a wider lens. And a wider lens causes more distortion. It pushes you away from the human eye. it seemed to make sense if we were shooting architecture and vistas, and also just kind of like a lot of other, majority of other scenes in the movie, that what it allows you to do is have this kind of intimacy, this connection with the audience, but then also allow the field of view allows you to explore the space as well that's surrounding that. Imagine if you went to a dinner party, you wouldn't be, a foot away from someone's face talking to them. You would be you would be responding to the space and to the conversation at the same time.
There's a kind of a follow-up question here from Tom, and it says, normally when we talk about large format film, we are talking about films that have hundreds of millions of dollars. Can you talk a bit about how this format affected the overall budget or shooting ratios that had to be considered? What were the financial considerations around VistaVision?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one. I mean, there obviously were financial considerations around that, but to be honest, with a filmmaker like Brady, we don't, from the very beginning, from Childhood of a Leader, he's like, I want to shoot film, I want to shoot 35. There have been other filmmakers where I've really had to get in the weeds, and I've spent a lot of time kind of working out how much more it's going to cost to shoot on film than digital and all that. That's not the case with Brady. He may be having these conversations with the financiers or the producers, but it wasn't happening with, I wasn't involved in that, which is great. It means I could just concentrate on my job. And we didn't have, what you have to do with shooting film, the ideal situation is when you commit, you shoot and you go home in the evening. What you don't do is have half an hour dissecting how much you're shooting. Are you shooting? It's a really, you have to kind of go in with both feet and be respectful that it's not, again, respectful of the budget and not just going crazy and shooting stuff for the hell of it or being, irresponsible. But at the same time, nobody relishes having those, you don't want to shoot film and then be like, conscious all the time of like, the dollars going through the gate. I mean, that's not where you want your concentration to be on the day. So, luckily we were supported in our decision by the producers, in that regard. But then in terms of like, the one thing to obviously point out is because if you're pulling 8 perforations of film through the gate per second, that's twice as much as you would pull through, even on 4 perf, which we don't normally shoot. We normally shoot 3 perf, So yeah, basically your film is lasting half the length of time when you're shooting VistaVision, which is, of course, by definition, a financial implication.
This question's from Tucker. And what questions do you ask a director you're working with in prep to help develop a look/visual style for a film? What are you doing to help yourself get inside of the director's head to help extract their language and vision?
So the beginning of the question was which films or?
What questions do you ask a director you're working with in prep to help develop a look and visual style for a film? Yeah, what questions?
That's an interesting question. I mean, Brady and I, as a consequence of doing 3 films together, we do have a shorthand. It's a kind of like people. I mean, it's like having a dance partner, kind of working with a director. It's kind of like it's not a marriage. It's kind of like having a really good dance partner in the best possible kind of version of it. It's how does it work? Wow, it's a big question. I mean, we do a lot of prep, but we don't storyboard all that much. We storyboarded one scene in the movie that was the scene with the dome. And the scene's fine, but it's not my favorite scene of the movie. I think the danger with getting it's a balance between being prepared, but not being too locked in or dictated to by a document or documents that you came up with in a room 2 weeks or 3 weeks before shooting, you know, because I think if you adhere too strongly to that, it denies a vitality or a sort of an in the moment response that I think hopefully comes through in the film. You know, a certain energy, a certain response. I think it can quite quickly become a little stale if you just adhere too much to, you know, to putting A to B to C to D, and the process becomes a kind of blueprint that you just have to kind of like construct the film out of, you know. So what else does it involve? I mean, I think this film is kind of like Brady's spoken about it like being a contrast of maximalist and the minimalist. So in many regards, you know, the Van Buren elements, the conversations with Van Buren, the architecture, the study of the architecture, the Carrara marble quarries. There's a real grandeur and kind of formalism to that to all of those scenes and those images. But then at the same time, there's a real sort of intimacy, specifically when Laszlo's having these like more personal encounters, you know, either with Erzsébet or his wife Erzsébet, or you know, in the brothel or in the jazz club or things like that. So I suppose we, you know, Brady between us we will sort of like discuss, okay, does it feel like this is a handheld scene? You know, like when we did the jazz club, it's supposed to be this hedonistic, like 2 a.m. Drunken high moment, you know. So in order to shoot, you know, if you were shooting that just on a dolly, kind of like tracking around, or just, you know, removed like from the back of the room watching it play out, I mean, you could do that, but you would be obviously saying something different. So the fact that we kind of shot with these distorted wide-angle lenses, and I was literally sort of throwing the camera backwards and forwards, and we had live music playing that Daniel, you know, orchestrated, and with a live jazz band, it was almost kind of like stepping into the documentary in a way. You know, it was kind of like embracing that, and I think that also kind of calibrated everybody. I mean, we shot that scene on day one, on a Tuesday afternoon. It's not the sexiest time of the week, you know. It's like, or not the, you know what I mean? Like 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. It's like, it doesn't scream hedonism, you know.
Right.
And so we really had to kind of like create that on the day, and really sort of like really wrestle it and sort of calibrate everybody into this mode, and you know, it's not the easiest thing to achieve, but I think we pulled it off.
Yeah, and that speaks a little bit into, I've heard you talk a little bit about your kind of lighting philosophy, and even speaking about Harry Savides, where he liked to light the room and not just faces and objects, but create a space where the characters can move sort of freely. And is that kind of how you approached a lot of the movie?
Yeah, I mean, we were working with incredibly technical actors, so of course we could have like worked with more marks, and we could have kind of pinned them down, and you know, and there were moments, of course, when, you know, I'm lighting through a window, and if Adrien goes one way or the other or something, you know, like, you know, you know, we had to kind of like finesse the positioning in order to maximize what the lighting was trying to do. But that's kind of a rarity. I mean, I do like to light the space. And of course, you see from the movie, there's lots of ambitious kind of single developing shots and things. So therefore, you know, you have to light the space. You don't have any other choice, really. Or the ship, you know, was very much lighting the space. But I'm not afraid of the dark either. And I'm not afraid of, I mean, I think what's interesting about filmmaking and audiences will allow you to go a lot further than you think you can go. You know, I don't think I've ever shot anything and an audience member has left because they're spatially confused, or they didn't see, you know, they're quite happy to work with a silhouette, you know, like, you know, I mean, the scene with Attila, Alessandro Nivola's character, you know, Laszlo's cousin, he's just completely in silhouette. The information just wasn't on the negative. It's not like we decided to do it in post. It's like there is no information there. So we're often making very bold decisions in that regard, you know. And Harris, you know, when Harris shot Birth, you know, he got in real trouble for underexposing the film. And we always underexpose and push process to create this more painterly aesthetic that's more akin to the pictorialist, the kind of earlier 20th century. Like, I don't like it when an image is too present. I like it when the eye has to work a little bit, you know. I mean, obviously a day exterior, it's a fairly open image, you know, lighting wise, because the ambient is kind of everywhere. In those instances, the lighting is a little bit more illuminated than lit. You know, I've been thinking of them on the hillside and things like this. It's harder to shape it. But then this one that we're looking at the moment is an interesting one because we shot all of that in magic hour without any lighting. So that was actually probably one of our most difficult scenes to pull off.
Because of the timing and the small window you had to shoot it in?
Yeah, we shot it in about 45 minutes, which is a real testament to the skill of Brady and the cast, and also our operator, Attila Pfeffer, a Steadicam operator, you know. But it was very important to us that this scene had this kind of it's a very mysterious time. I mean, for me, Twilight is a very sort of melancholic time anyway, and the French call it like the time between the dog and the wolf, meaning it has this kind of strange, unsettling quality to it. And I think it's interesting because this scene is almost like a Faustian pact, you know. This is the moment when Laszlo and Van Buren kind of seal the deal. And so it is elegant, and it you know... But it also kind of it has a kind of uncanny quality to it that I think can sometimes be unsettling. Like I'm thinking of the films of I'm thinking of Melancholia, Lars von Trier film, or I'm thinking of Gregory Crutzen or Todd Heido, you know, where sometimes there's a disconnect between the lighting and the motivation, and it imbues the image with something a little that the brain can't quite wrap itself around.
Another question from Arman. I would love to know what lenses you shot with that gave those beautiful vertical flares, as well as the reasoning behind using one takers in certain scenes and standard coverage in others.
Okay, well, so two things. Three things. We shot with Leica R prime lenses for the VistaVision, and scenes where we were unable to use the VistaVision because of like a handheld shot where I needed a smaller camera on the shoulder. We shot with Cooke S4s, which are across all three films for Brady. I've used the Cooke S4s. Beautiful lenses, you know, the Cooke look that people talk about. They're wonderful on skin. Now, coming to the flares, that wasn't created by the lens. What that was a technique that we sort of stole from John Matheson's work on a film called Love is the Devil. I mean, other people have used it as well, but that's where I first saw it. And the idea is you take a 435, an RE435 camera, and you put it in maintenance mode. So you basically mistime the shutter. So as the shutter is opening, the film is actually being pulled through, which is not what it should do. It should obviously, the film should remain stable and constant and still for a 24th of a second, you know, as the shutter opens. So as the film is being pulled through, it smears the highlights. It's most noticeable in the highlights. So the rest of the image remains intact, but the highlights become smeared. And so that was what we were doing in the scenes where you see that. And then there was a third part of the question at the very end, I think. What was the...
Yep. The second part of it was, let me see, where's that? We're getting a lot of questions. Great. Okay. What was the reasoning behind using one takers in certain scenes and standard coverage in others?
Oh, interesting. Well, there's a filmmaker, I don't remember the name of, I'm ashamed to say, a director who famously said, every cut is a lie, and it's an interesting idea. I don't agree with it necessarily, but it's an interesting discussion point, meaning obviously that, every time you draw attention to the edit, it pulls you out of reality, a certain perceived reality that we have. Of course, the entire thing is an optical illusion from beginning to end, but that's a different discussion. But really, it's really Brady who kind of will throw the gauntlet down to me with these films and say, I want this to be one continuous take, and there are times where I've definitely sort of asked the question, are you sure you don't need anything else? Da 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 da. But I've never really pressed the point. I've just kind of it's occurred to me that maybe we need an additional angle. Like, for example, when Elizabeth accuses Van Buren in the end of the Brutalist, we play the whole accusation on not even on Felicity's face, but in profile, on her profile, which is kind of unorthodox, and then we don't cut back to, there's not this shot, reverse shot, ping-ponging for, accusation, response, da-da-da. The camera then just kind of does its own thing and then drifts off to find the response. And I was definitely surprised. I've worked with Brady enough to not be surprised, but in that case, I was like, oh, are we sure that the audience is going to get enough information, kind of thing, But this is why you trust the director, and this is why he's directing it and I'm shooting it. It's it's just Brady could tell you more about his motivation for single takes, but I do think they're often in the most intense moments in the movie, where you are sort of the audience is forced to not be able to kind of look away in many regards. I think they're very, very ambitious and very successful, and I think they're just kind of unapologetic as well, which is good. We're not being forced to cut to a close-up to get the reaction. And I watch the movie now, and I don't feel like I'm emotionally distanced because of that, So for me, it's successful.
How did your early years as a cinematographer start and look like? And are there aspects of how you were then or visions that you had that got lost over the years and you would like to implement again?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. Well, I'll be very brief about kind of how I got into it, but if that was indeed the first part of the question, I haven't just made that up. But essentially, it went from art to photography to moving image. I studied film theory and 16mm filmmaking at university. I was lucky enough to meet a director and a producer who I went on to shoot my second feature film with, and a number of shorts. So within about 9 years of leaving university, I shot my first film in Mississippi called Ballast. So it was fairly quick. But during that time, I was also working as an AC because I realized that it wasn't just about what you know or what you learn. It's about having the confidence to implement that as well, So, what it's like. The very first day on a film set, you're always in someone's way. You don't have a place, You're just kind of in the way of everybody, And it takes you some time to kind of earn that place, and also to be able to earn the respect of people and your own confidence to be able to say, no, I think we should do this, da 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 da. So for everyone it's different, but for me that's just the time that it took. And then coming to the second part of the question, I really hope that there's this one thing that I have, which is the way that I see the certain way that I see the world or respond to a space or a performance or move a camera, that is possibly similar to other people, Robbie Ryan, Christopher Doyle, you know, I mean in ethos. I hope there's that thing that I carry through and that never deserts me, because that's the one thing that I rely on, you know? And it's the thing that elevates you from being 100% in the technical to being able to sort of like have your own voice or vision as an artist or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, so, you know, as a result of that, it means there are some things that I just can't do. Like I don't get called to do a lot of kind of like cosmetic, high-end beauty stuff, right? Because I generally tend to kind of embrace people feeling and looking pretty real. And as you know, they look fantastic, but they don't look cosmetic. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I'm fine with that. It's just like I can't do everything. And I think if you end up trying to do everything, you don't really find your voice, you know? It's interesting. But yeah, that's how I feel about it, that whatever that thing is, and whenever it was formed or whatever, it's like people talk about auteur theory, you know, this common thread throughout directors' work, throughout their oeuvre, their worldview or whatever it is. I mean, I think everybody has that to a certain extent. That is an artist or whatever the term is, whatever you would term a cinematographer. I think the things that you're drawn to remain, you know, and so there is a bit of a through path, and I find it hard to see it or talk about it, but people have said, oh, well, yes, I recognize, I saw a movie, I didn't know you shot it, but I knew when I saw it that you'd shot it, you know, which is a lovely compliment, and it's really intriguing to know what they're seeing, but or feeling, but you know.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought about developing and honing in your own voice and being able to create images that are unique to you. Because even my comment at the very beginning of the conversation was about how unique, and the movie feels like it just holds its own place. In, you know, a lot of movies are kind of fast food movies, if you want to see it that way, and what you can see when an artist has honed in their own voice and their own contribution to the medium, and then it stands alone. But like you said, that also means that not every movie fits you, or not every project fits you, but the ones that do then are left with a large imprint, which is you know, it's kind of the goal. It's kind of the dream that every artist has.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also this thing that I just don't regard myself as too much of a kind of impositional DP, in the sense that, like, I tend to be, what's the word? I tend to sort of, for me, it's not about the lighting. It's not about, like, it's about the mood and the feel and the response and the way the camera responds and things like that. So in a way, it's like, for me, it's about trying to be receptive and then respond to that, as opposed to, this is how I feel the movie should look, and then impose it. Do you know what I mean? Like, my early conversations with directors is not, I mean, sometimes I have a very, very, very strong idea of, like, references or the way the light, you know, the quality of light and things. But a lot of the time I like to not be too dogmatic about the look, you know, and impose the look. It's really a discussion and understanding how the director feels it should be. And then, you know, this is like it very, very early on, of course. And then if we're clicking or connecting, then it evolves from that, you know.
Here's an interesting question. It's kind of long, but I'll try to do my best to make it come across well. So while a lot of movies have used VistaVision for visual effects in the past, The Brutalist is the first film shot on it for the majority of the film since at least 20 years. Coincidentally, Coincidentally, there are not only author filmmakers reviving the format in recent years, with Yorgos Lanthimos experimenting on it with Poor Things, and for their next film, and Paul Thomas Anderson also seemingly shooting on it for his newest. To what extent were you and Brady Corbet in conversation with those filmmakers, and how do you explain a resurgence in this large format? Will there be more people in the future now shooting on it? Did other filmmakers reach out to you about intending to shoot on it in the future?
Okay, interesting. I'll try and be concise. Not really a lot of dialogue with the filmmakers, as far as I'm aware. I don't know if Brady. I don't think Brady's been in discussion with PTA about it. I know Robbie Ryan, so I did talk to him a little bit. I think about technicians and who can help support it and things like that. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it's just kind of like, I don't know why. I mean, I'm very, very happy that it's happening, but I don't know why a group of filmmakers have gravitated back to the VistaVision format. I mean, I think in many regards, it's I mean, it's a different thing to 65 mil, right? But in some regards, there's a financial kind of constraint. Like it's often financially prohibitive to shoot 65 because of the cost of the stock. So it is. I haven't crunched the numbers, but it is kind of more expensive, I think. The other thing is that oddly, even though there are more 65 mil cameras than VistaVision, the demand on 65 has been historically more. So it's harder for filmmakers in our realm on this budget. Like, say, for example, you have a rental company and you approach them with a budget of, $8 million, right? And then they let you have the cameras, and then Warner Brothers approach them and say, hey, we want to shoot, 65 on this movie. And they're like, well, we let all our cameras go, So it's like, that's not the case with other film cameras because there's just so many of them worldwide. But when all of these things, VistaVision and 65 becomes rarefied, it's harder to make the demands on it. I mean, I definitely know since finishing the movie, there are more VistaVision cameras out there than I realized. And I think people are making technological inroads in order to improve shooting on those camera systems, and things like that. I mean, the video tap that comes off the camera is not great. Just because there hasn't been a lot of R&D in film cameras for such a long time. Companies like Ari and Panavision, they've been putting all their efforts into, film camera, digital cameras, right? It's just the way it's been going. So I don't know. I'm really, really intrigued to see, obviously, PTA's films, to film on VistaVision, and very intrigued to see what other people are going to be doing next with the format. Let's see. I mean, listen, the only way to keep film alive is to keep shooting film, right? Use it or lose it. So the more people that shoot, the better, on film, as far as I'm concerned.
When you read a script for the first time, do you think about how you potentially want to shoot it, or do you just focus on the story and then later collaborate with the director on the visualization?
I think story first and foremost. I mean, I think, the best work across all of the heads of department is about serving the story. I think if you get into a position where you're serving yourself before the story, or your ego, or whatever it might be, I think you're in hot water with that. I think you have to understand the story in order to know where to know where to put the camera, to know how to move the camera, to know which lens to use. They're just storytelling devices. So I think if you have too much of a predetermined idea of what the image is, and then try and impose it on the story, and it doesn't fit, then that's where you have this kind of like this separation. You know, you have this idea that like sometimes I'll watch a film and it's an incredibly well-crafted film, but I feel like the lighting is off doing its own thing a little bit, you know. It's sort of like, I think I prefer the movies that there's a little bit more humility or I don't know if that's the right word, but a kind of call and response, a kind of like, you know, that you're serving. You can make your own. You sometimes make your own concessions or your own. You take a step back to not impose. I keep coming back to this idea of imposition. I don't know why, but it's just the only way I can think of it is, you know, that's how I describe it.
Mm. How does your process change when you're shooting digital versus shooting film?
Well, I mean, I work with LUTs. I probably work with LUTs in order to make them look like film. It's like most of the time. I don't really light differently for digital, to be honest. I think I'm always desperately trying to make the image as close to film as it can be. I mean, not always. I'm very kind of like I've always been inspired and in awe and a great fan of like Anthony Dodd Mantle's work on like Feston and Julian Donkey Boy and stuff, where it wasn't trying to look like 35. It was trying to look like its a whole other format. So in some regards, I'm not saying that I want everything to look like 35, but you know, certainly in the cases of where I've signed on to a movie thinking it could be film and it's ended up going digital, then I'm trying to sort of take I think I'm always trying to like find a way of reducing the clarity, you know, this idea of like 8K and whatever. It's like it just doesn't make for me. I mean, it depends what movie you're making, but it doesn't always result in the best, you know, the bigger the number, the better the image, you know?
Mm. Yeah. What are the most common mistakes you see young aspiring cinematographers making?
I don't think I've been asked this before. I don't know, maybe. I don't know. Don't know how much I don't know. Don't quite know how to answer that. Maybe just this idea of maybe. I mean, this is again a personal choice, so it's not necessarily. I'm not necessarily right in saying this, but maybe the idea of serving the technical too much. Like, I think for me, being in a room talking about a new lens or you know the stop of a lens or da 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 da. I'm less interested in that than talking to like a writer or a director about storytelling. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't necessarily mean that this is a mistake, but I'm just I would encourage, I suppose, cinematographers to not obsess too much about the technical. You know, it's not about crunching numbers and talking about. At the end of the day, even I don't care. Like if I watch a scene and I believe the scene, but something is overexposed or there's some technical issue that maybe wasn't planned, or you know, I'm happy to go with that. You know, like it's not the be all and end all for me. You know, so it's that's what I would say is like trust the storytelling process and trust the audience and allow it to elevate it outside of the technical, you know, above the technical.
Do you think that because a lot of what we see often, and I was going to actually ask you a question about this, but kind of following up on your comment about focusing on the technical, sometimes I think that because there's so much information available about the technical, especially if you on social media or wherever, that's sort of where we go, where our attention gets drawn to okay, there's a YouTube video more about this is how
Yeah.
you use this type of camera. And then I also noticed that you're not really on social media. So I was curious if that's been sort of a choice to go, I can be an artist and not really have to coexist with some of those distractions that a lot of maybe younger cinematographers have to deal with.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, the relationship with social media. I mean, I just, yeah, I mean, I think it, I think there are some incredible sites out there, and I've done a lot of press with, like this, that obviously is promoted on social media. And I think that's wonderful in order for us to have this exchange of ideas. I do think that, yes, there is a tendency for, for something to be slightly obsessive about the technical, and the lenses. And like, I've been asked by one company to like, to attach corresponding focal lengths to every image they've shown me in the Brutalist, and it's like, well, A, I can't remember. B, I don't really know how important that is or who would care about that. I mean, I don't know what you do with that information. You go, oh, okay, well, in order to make it look like that, I'll use a 25 mil. And it's like, well, it's like it doesn't work that way. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it might help, but I think most people, it doesn't take very long for most people to get past that point. So I don't really know how long that information is relevant, And yeah, I don't know. I mean, about the social media thing. It's kind of like, I'm of a certain age, I suppose. Like, I'm 50, so there are definitely kind of like cinematographers half my age who, they love it and they get in, and all that stuff. And I get, it's fine, but I just I don't know. I think you can get a little too. I dip in and out of it, and to everybody who puts stuff up there for free, I'm incredibly grateful, and I can use it as a resource, and I think it's amazing. But yeah, I'm not the best at constantly kind of like it takes a lot of time and energy to constantly keep uploading things that you're doing during your day. And I don't know, I'm probably a little wary about like the whole Andy Warhol 15 minutes of fame thing. It's like, I think it's slightly imbued with a sense of like self-importance, in its worst possible sense, because it's like, who cares what your food looks like? It's like, I don't know, I don't know. I mean, I'm being a little old and grumpy about it.
I love hearing that perspective. Well, let's get back up to maybe something a little more technical. Can you speak to the lens? Can you speak to the lens and filtration selection for the film, S4s, Leica Rs, and super speeds, etc.? And where and when were they used and why? Any favorite focal lengths?
This is exactly what I said I didn't want to do, in the last question.
That's why I wanted to ask you that right away.
Amazing.
Can you if I pull up an image, can you tell me what lens you used on that?
No. I mean, I definitely can obviously in terms of the very, we spoke about the smeared highlights and things like this, But I mean, we also used Angenieux zooms, the Optimo 24 to 290 and things like that. We use that. What was the question again that I wanted to avoid? What was it?
Let's did you like the? I guess. Hold on. Let me go back.
Oh, you've lost it. Fantastic.
I wanted to bother you with that question. No, it's all good. Do you have any favorite focal lengths? Okay. Why were they certain types of lenses used? When and why? And do you have any favorite focal lengths?
I got this. So basically, there are certain extreme moments in the movie. So in the jazz club, we use wide angle lenses for this kind of sense of distortion and disorientation. Kind of, but this is again that's the technical. What's interesting about it is we were referencing Otto Dick's paintings and a lot of kind of paintings and photos of jazz clubs at a certain time. So it was a device just in order to feel sort of transcendent in this kind of heady, hedonistic. How do you, what is your lens choice, or what is your aesthetic to try and encapsulate or convey this sense of what it feels like in that moment to the audience? And our answer was, well, let's have these distorted lenses, and let me lie on my back and whip pan the camera from Adrien to the band, and let's disorientate, and let's feel alive, and hopefully radical, and just energized. And that's what we were trying to do with it. At the beginning of the movie, like, there's a shot where we're following a bus, and then it's like the POV of the bus, and it's like low sun, and it's very wide angle. And we used a similar device in Vox Lux, in the beginning of Vox Lux, and that was like an 8R, which is an RE 8mm rectilinear lens. Rectilinear meaning that it doesn't distort as much, like it doesn't fall into the fisheye, And the idea of that was this idea of kind of like real momentum at the beginning of the movie, very charged, sort of all-encompassing field of view that just kind of like raced down the road, close to the road. And it had this, it was basically Laszlo starting his life from New York to Philadelphia, and it just has this intent, I think, and it has this. I mean, it's a bit like, thinking about it now, because I watched it on the train, on the plane the other day, like The Shining. If you think about the beginning of The Shining, there's a real intent to that photography. And also this, interestingly, this is like almost like this omnipotent, certainly we had this in Vox Lux, almost this like omnipotent perspective, like not like godlike, but devilish. Do you know what I mean? Like at the beginning of The Shining, it feels like that. It's like, this whole idea of The Shining, this whole idea of this force, this kind of like supernatural ability to kind of read each other's thoughts, and that throughout the movie, like it starts right from the beginning of The Shining with this sense of like who is watching, like who is hovering over them, and and we take the position of the audience takes the position of this like omnipotent force that's silently tracking them towards the Overlook Hotel, and so it's like that, I think, a little bit with Vox Lux and the Brutalist,
That's great. All while doing it at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can you talk about how you choose where to put the camera in a scene? It's such a basic question, but I'm curious about translating what's in the script to conveying an emotion to the audience with the camera, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. The most important thing to say is that where I or Brady choose to put the camera is just a choice. It's not the right choice. It's right for us. Somebody else can tell a story in a different way, I mean, it sounds an obvious thing to say, but it's like, it's about having belief in your own voice, not copy, or believing, this idea that it's right or wrong. It's like, how do you paint a picture, It's up to you, and so all you can really do is kind of think about what the scene is about. Do I want to feel intimately connected to the characters? Whose position am I taking? Is there a subjectivity? Is there an objectivity? If I take this position, is that camera going to evolve in some way? And is it going to track around? Is it going to zoom in? Is it going to, jib up and down? Whatever you're able to do. So the simple question is, this is probably unsatisfying, but it's mostly intuition. It's mostly gut reaction. Sometimes, I remember seeing in Childhood of a Leader, we just couldn't find the place to put the camera. It works in the end because it's quite a functional scene within the movie, but in the end, it was so hard. Everywhere we put a camera with the lens choice or whatever, it just wasn't right, I don't know if that's because we were tired or just certain things didn't fall into place. But most of the time, well, for me, the process is a lot of the time before we start filming, I'll go to a space and without the director or, once we've said this is where we're going to shoot, and I'll try and just go there on my own, sort of listen to it. I know it sounds a little, I don't know, but I'll sort of like, I'll let the space kind of like offer something up, in terms of the light, or and I'll sort of take a series of photos. So rather than storyboarding, I'll be like, okay, well, I know on an Artemis or whatever, this is an 18 mil, and I know I can physically get there, which is much more successful than storyboarding, because sometimes you just can't put the camera, especially if you work with a storyboard artist. Sometimes directors work with storyboard artists, and it's like, well, and I get these boards, and I'm like, well, that's not possible, or that's not the most interesting thing to do. So it's tricky, because with all due respect to storyboard artists, they can sort of like, they're not in the discussion 24/7 with the director, about that. So anyway, I'll tend to sort of like be in a space, and then I'll have a collection of images that I think represent the space, and then I'll kind of have them in my pocket as in my mind as an idea. So then when I'm looking at the scenes, I'll work out what might be the master angle, or et cetera, So that's kind of how it works.
What are your go-to techniques for maintaining consistency when shooting over multiple days with changing natural light?
Once more?
Ooh, I lost it. 1 second. I scrolled up and down. What are your go-to techniques for maintaining consistency when shooting over multiple days with changing natural light?
I mean, good luck. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's, who knows? I don't know what the techniques are. I mean, certainly in the way, okay, one technique could be, and I don't do this, you have so much time and manpower and resources that you just, I wanted to do this in some respects on the last movie I shot, but there was no way it was going to happen. We had a big wedding scene over several days in Europe, and the sun was in and out and in and out. And the best I could do was be clever about the time of day that we tried to shoot, in which direction. And I had a Manitou with like a 20 by, or two Manitous with 20 bys to block the sun. But then it's tricky, because as soon as you block the sun, you're then missing the hard light that you might want. So then you'd have to bring in a lot of lighting to replicate. So you're basically reproducing everything. I've never really done that, because, the closest I got was maybe like on White Noise, which was this Noah Baumbach film, because we had a lot of time and resources to be able to make that work. But unfortunately, most of us, me included, as far as I'm aware, are sort of at the mercy of just, with White Noise, we had the scene where the Gladneys, the family in the movie, leave the Boy Scout hut. We shot that over several days with several units, and then they came back and did pickups and things. Unfortunately, you just have to rely on the grader. But you have to rely on the colorist in the final DI to help you out, to smooth everything out. And to be honest, you have to rely on the audience to not care too much. It's like, that's the upshot. You have to just do your best. But I don't really know the answer, other than imposing complete control, denying any of the light, starting from scratch and relighting it. Now, Greg Fraser probably would give you an answer similar to that. I don't know. I haven't been in a position to be able to do that. And then also the way that I respond, like, I tend, that's not my natural response. My natural response is to try and embrace the light and sort of work with it and let it inform it. And, so, but at the end of the day, none of us want a kind of really inconsistent scene where it's like overcast and the reverse is sunny and then it's overcast. Like, that's a nightmare. I'm not, as much as I talk about embracing the accidental, I'm not I'm not an advocate for the scene looking bad, you know,
Yeah.
or taking the audience out of a movie, you know.
What is the process you start with when bringing your thoughts to the director? It's a fine line of having your artistic voice and also meeting theirs. So
Okay, once more.
what is the process you start with when bringing your thoughts to the director?
I feel like we've covered some of this. I mean, I think you know. First off, I just keep an open mind. I like to know what the director is thinking. I'm trying to think the last time that I've sat down for the very first time with the director and they've said, "Okay, so how should the movie look?" You know, I've never really had that, and I would, to be honest, I would possibly struggle because that's not. I mean, I could definitely sort of dictate the look or be dogmatic in the look in that regard, but it's not really my process, you know. My process is a kind of like an evolution of, you know, and I think most people tend to be like that as well. Yeah, so it really is just a kind of like, well, one thing I would say is that you can't be too precious also about ideas that you have. You know, if you have ideas and then like, you know, the hope is that if you're with the right collaborators, you'll throw ideas out and then maybe like 75, 80% stick to the wall, you know, and then the others bounce off. And then if it's lower than that, you're probably not with the right people. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, you're going to spend so much time on set or in prep having one idea and going down this road and you're not in tune with either the story or the way that the director wants the story to be told, you know. So it's yeah, it's. I hope that's that goes some way to answer it.
Well, you likened it to a dance partner, so maybe that's part of the answer. Just going and dancing with your partner.
Yeah, if you keep treading on the other person's feet, you're not going to last so long.
There you go.
Or if you're doing a different dance, would be the more eloquent way of saying it. If you're both doing two different dances, it, you know.
What's the most important way for you to get your next job? Is it others viewing your previous work and wanting you, relationships you have with other directors, or is it your agent sending scripts your way?
It's all three. I mean, it's nice to have repeat customers. It's nice for people that are looking your work to see that you have repeat customers. You know what I mean? There is like a concern, like, oh, he only seems to work once with every director. You know, that's you know, that's the implications can be you know, a little bad about that. But yeah, I mean, it's also like, you know, I'm getting sent scripts at the moment by my agents, both in the UK and in the US. I'm talking to Brady about his next film. You know, it's very, very early days, but we're having those conversations, and he's invited me to shoot it, and it's you know, yeah, it's a combination of all those things, you know.
Do you have any advice for someone about to shoot their first feature?
Try and enjoy it, you know. It's it's like it's you know, it's a long period of time. I mean, generally it's about 6 weeks prep and 6 weeks filming minimum. So, you know, that's a good 3 months of being away from friends and family and you know, try and pick the right people. Know your tribe, you know, because it's pretty miserable. I've had experiences where I've been away and I'm just not with the right people, you know. I'm not the right fit for the movie. I mean, luckily, they've been few and far between, but it's a miserable experience when that is the case. So just be careful who you're climbing in with.
That's a great answer. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. What are some qualities or maybe personal skills that you think people should work on developing more?
I think, well, it's interesting. Yeah. okay, you can know everything about the technical, but that doesn't make you, that doesn't necessarily get you the job or make you the cinematographer that you wish to be. I think, as you know, it's the technical. Also, you know, probably 50% of it is about being personable, or is about, um, being somebody that people want to be around or enjoy the company of, and you can express ideas and you can do it in a non-confrontational way. And, I mean, it's tricky, and sometimes it can be very, very stressful and you're tired and, it's hard to stay true to those things. But yeah, there's definitely those qualities that are very important. It's like, if you're going to be in the trenches with somebody, you don't want there to be a lot of infighting, and you got to just so have something to say it in a nice way, and know how to articulate it technically, I guess.
Communication skills, yeah, it's really important. Be able to translate your ideas to a way that the other person can understand them,
or find a way of convincing them.
Yeah, you gotta become a great salesman.
Yeah.
I know we're over kind of the hour that we had allotted, but there's more questions. If you have to run, please just let me know. I want to be respectful.
Sure.
If we have to,
I could do
wrap
like
up,
another 10 minutes.
great. So, let's take advantage of that time. Here's another question. Do you have any book recommendations for learning the emotional side of cinematography, or general books cinematographers should read?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, it's been a long time. When I first started out, there were several books. I can't for the life of me remember. I mean, there were mainly sort of cinematography lighting techniques, because I remember, as much as, everything that I've harped on about in this conversation, I do remember at certain points being like, I want to know how to light, and it's tricky, because I'm also aware that everything I'm talking about, at the end of the day, people kind of want to know, how do you do it? And it's not, when you're talking in this way that's like, well, it's about the heart, or it's about people are like, well, I don't know what that means. Do you know what I mean? It's like, they kind of want to know, how do I make it look like that? And short of actually being, I don't know, it's like, it's obviously really important. It's really, really important to people, and it's important to me that I am able to make something look the way it looks. But once you've kind of like, I mean, I've said it before, it's a bit like driving a car. Once you've learned the technical, you can enjoy the journey. You're no longer thinking about changing gears and, where's my foot going? And so, it becomes this second nature thing. And once it becomes second nature, then suddenly you can look out the window and you can enjoy the journey and the music and all that, But in terms of books, there's what is it like? There's a book like Masters of Light. I think any conversations with cinematographers are probably more useful than the technical. Because also the technical evolves so quickly now with LED lighting and things like that. I mean, I remember I had the very first book I got was the American Society of Cinematographers Handbook. And I assume they still have updated editions of that, and that was kind of really useful. I'd love to see it now, because it's going to be so wildly different. I mean, I got my copy in like 96 or 7, so it was like it's like there was no digital elements in there at all, so that would be intriguing. But yeah, there's also just like wonderful books on photography, like I got a book for Christmas from my wife on pictorialist photography, right? And that was all about the advent of photography. The pictorialists were finding a way of elevating photography from being a scientific endeavor to an art form, And so it's like that, I find that stuff absolutely fascinating. So it's like, if you're gonna immerse yourself in books, again, try to avoid it being too much about the technical. Really the great thing also about these filmmaking books and cinematography books where they're interviewing people, whether it's like, Chris Doyle on Chris Doyle or whatever, you're actually hearing their philosophies and stuff. So it's, yeah, I mean, I'm afraid I can't give you any more specific titles, but...
Yeah, this is the question of the decade, but are you worried about AI taking jobs from cinematographers and other crew in the future?
In short, yes, of course. Because I've made a career out of being a cinematographer. And yeah, if the worst case scenario was that these things became automated to the point where this whole conversation, I hope, is largely, if I've said anything, it's been about having one's personal voice and one's personal view on the world, and if that's been denied, then I think that's a shame. If these things just become kind of automated in some way, but I think AI is it's not going anywhere in the same way that doing digital intermediate technology for color timing hasn't gone anywhere. And hopefully the best case scenario is it just becomes a tool for us to be able to continue doing our jobs, so that's all I probably have to say on it.
That's great. Let's see. What makes you say yes when deciding to take on a movie?
That's a very interesting one. I mean, it's a number of things. First and foremost, it should be the story and the people who are you're closely involved in making the movie with, So, story, director, and cast, and budget, and location. I'm going through these in order of what, not necessarily what is always the case, but what I think should be the preference, availability, obviously, but it's really just about and also seeing the person's body of work. Like, I've worked with a lot of first-time filmmakers, so that's always been a bit of a, it's a gamble in a sense, because you don't know their other work and you haven't seen what they're able to achieve or whether they can achieve it. But fortunately, I've been incredibly lucky with those first-time filmmakers. But I think I've had enough conversations with them early on and they've been incredibly articulate and thoughtful, and so, I've trusted them and they've trusted me,
That's great. Well, as we're getting ready to that 10-minute mark, I want to, again, be respectful of your time, but is there anything that maybe throughout your entire press rounds that you've been doing that you haven't been able to talk about when it comes to the movie, the experience, or the images that you created that you're actually like, I wish I got to talk more about this aspect of it?
Oh, interesting. No, I think I've been managed to shoehorn my opinions into every conversation and get my thoughts and ideas across. No, not really. No, there's been ample opportunity for me to kind of explore this stuff. So no, it's been very nice. It's been very nice to sort of not just celebrate the film, but to obviously talk about my approach and my craft and how I approach my craft. And no, I think the world's heard a lot about a lot of my opinions over the last 2 months.
It's great. So you'll get to take a little bit of a break after the awards, I'm sure.
I know it'll all be over. It'll be like, well, where did they go? It'll be I've got used to the attention, so I'll be I'll have to be I'll be like the party's over and everyone's left.
It's like that scene in what's PTA's movie, the dance scene where it's like after the party. Um, Now I'm just jinxing it. So that's a bad note to leave on. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate your time and
No,
your
thanks.
insight.
It's been
And
fun.
good luck with everything, especially the awards. Yeah, it's great to talk to you. So we appreciate you.
Great. Thanks so
We'll
much.
we'll do
Appreciate it.
another one after the holidays, so you still have a lot of friends who want to know more from you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. That sounds good. I'll hold you to it.
All
All
right,
right.
thanks everyone.
Take
We'll
care.
post this online and we'll do another one soon. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.